Okay, today we'll study one more important topic, that is the anatomy of the female reproductive system, as well as we'll also try to discuss the breast. Okay, so we will discuss this topic under the following headings: describe the different components of the female reproductive system, describe the anatomy of the pelvic peritoneum in female, describe the anatomy of the female breast, and describe the structure of the mammary gland. Okay. So this is the female reproductive organs. So here you can see this is the uterus and this is the vagina here, and these are the uterine tubes, and the main primary organ, that is the ovary, is here. So this is the ovary, and these are the fallopian tube and uterus, and this is the vagina. Okay. So coming to the components of the female reproductive system, the female reproductive organs can be subdivided into the internal genitalia as well as the external genitalia. Just like in case of the male, here also it is divided into two types. The internal genitalia, those organs which are within the true pelvis. Okay, so this is the pelvis. So this is the pelvis within which there are organs. These are called as the internal genitalia, which includes the vagina. This is the vagina here. Then we have the cervix in the lower part and the uterus in the upper part. Okay, then we have the uterine tubes or fallopian tubes or oviduct. There are different names for this. So this is the fallopian tube. Then we have the ovary. This is the main primary organ, just like in case of the male, it will be the testis. Here it will be the ovary. So this is the ovary, fallopian tubes. This is the uterus, cervix, and the vagina. And then we have the external genitalia, which lies outside the true pelvis, which is seen from the outside, which include the perineum, the mons pubis, clitoris, urethral meatus, that is the opening of the urethra, labia majora, minora, vestibule, greater vestibular glands, then skinny glands, and the periurethral area. So all these are the components of the female reproductive system, which include the internal as well as the external genitalia. So to begin with, we'll discuss the main primary organ, just like in case of the testis. It is very similar to that of the testis. Okay, but this lies not outside like in case of males in the scrotum, but it will lie within the pelvis. Okay, the ovaries, they are almond shaped oval organs, just like in case of male, and the size also similar, 4 into 2 centimeters, 4 centimeters in length and 2 centimeters in breadth, and it is oval shape. Usually lies against the lateral wall of the pelvis in a depression called as ovarian fossa. This lies within a cavity called as the ovarian fossa. Within the ovarian fossa, this ovary will be present. Okay, bounded by externally by the external iliac vessels above and by the internal iliac vessels behind. So the above will be the external iliac vessels and the internal iliac vessels will be behind. What is the function of the ovaries in case of female? It will be the production of the female germ cell, that is the oogenesis or the female germ cells. Okay, production of the female germ cells called as the oogenesis. As well as, just like in case of male, they also secrete hormones, the female sex hormone, especially the estrogen and the progesterone. So it is very similar to that of the testis. Functions also to the production of the germ cells as well as the hormones. It is attached to the back of the broad ligament by a peritoneal cord called as mesovarium. If you see here, this is the broad ligament. This is a long peritoneal fold, which is called called as the broad ligament. On either side, it is covered by a peritoneal fold called as the broad ligament. And the peritoneal fold, it covers everywhere this ovary, and it is attached behind by a structure called as the meso-ovarium. Meso-ovarium. Its medial end is attached to the uterus by a ligament of ovary. If you see here, there is a ligament behind. Okay. So here there is a ligament called as the ligament of ovary on the medial side. It is held in its position. It is attached to the uterus by the ligament of ovary, and its lateral end is attached to fimbria of the uterine tubes. If you see here, on the lateral side, we have the fimbriae. Fimbriae. Some of the fimbria are attached to the ovary. Fimbria is the part of the fallopian tube. Okay. So this is the fimbria on the lateral side and the ligament of ovary on the medial side. So this is the glue structured. This is the ovary. Coming to the blood supply, it is similar to that of the testis. Here they are supplied by the ovarian artery. There it is the testicular artery. Here it is ovarian artery. Arises from the same spot, again the abdominal aorta at the level of the first to third lumbar vertebra. So it is taking origin from the aorta, and these are the ovarian arteries on either side. Here, this is the ovarian artery. Here is the ovarian artery. Venous drainage, it is again similar to that of the testis. On the right side, it will be draining into the inferior vena cava. Here, as you can see, this is the right ovarian vein, but the left will be draining into the left renal vein, and from there into the aorta. Okay, so the ovarian vein drains into the inferior vena cava on the right side and into the left renal vein on the left side. So this is also similar to that of the testicular arteries and veins. So there is varicose. Varicosity is less common in case of the female. Okay, and if it is present, the varicocele will be present on the left side than on the right side because of the drainage. The lymphatic drainage is into the para-aortic group of lymph nodes, again similar to that of the testis. Very similar. If you study the testis, it is very similar to the ovaries. Nerve supply is by a plexus called the aortic plexus. Okay, aortic plexus will be around this and accompany the ovarian artery. Now coming to the fallopian tube. So this is the long tube. This is called as the fallopian tube, but it is also called as the uterine tube, or also it is called as the ovita. Ovita. Okay. So the length of this tube is almost 10 centimeters. It is 10 centimeters long tube. It is enclosed in the upper border of the broad ligament of the uterus. If you see here, this is the broad ligament. So it is present in the upper border. So the fallopian tube, the broad ligament is actually hanging on this fallopian tubes on either side. Okay. It is divided into four parts. This fallopian tube is divided into four parts. The first part is called as the infundibulum. From lateral to medial side, infundibulum. You can see here, this is the infundibulum. Then we have the ampulla part. Then we have the narrow part called isthmus. Then we have a part which is embedded within the wall of the uterus. That is called as intraneural part. Coming to the infundibulum, it looks like a funnel shape lateral end that projects beyond the broad ligament and overlies the ovaries. It is beyond the broad ligament and overlies the ovary. The free edge of the funnel has finger-like projections called as fimbriae. These are the finger-like projections. So these are called as fimbria. Fimbriae. When they are multiple, they are called as fimbriae. So finger-like projections from this infundibulum are called as fimbriae. Coming to the ampulla, ampulla is a very important structure. It is the most widest part of the tube. It is the most widest part of the tube, and this is the site for fertilization. So this is the site for fertilization. That's why this ampullary part, which is the most dilated part and the large part, is the most widened part as well as the site for fertilization. Then we have a narrow part here called as the isthmus. Isthmus. If you see here, shown this narrow part is called as isthmus. This is the infundibulum, broad part. Okay, widest part. where the fertilization takes place, and this is the isthmus. Okay. It is the narrowest part of the tube and lies just lateral to the uterus. Then we have the intramural part, is the segment that pierces the uterine wall, the part of the fallopian tube which enters the wall. You know, the wall of the uterus is thick, so it has to pass through the wall, and that part is called as intramural. Intra means inside, mural is the muzzle. Okay, muzzle of the uterus. Okay. Then, what are the functions of this fallopian tube? One is it is the site of fertilization. As we saw, the ampulla is the part where the fertilization takes place. So that is the site of fertilization. The second is a transportation of the fertilized ovum into the uterus. The sperms actually pass from the vagina to the uterus and from there to the ampullary part. Here fertilization takes place, and then the fertilized egg will move back into the uterus through this fallopian tube. So the transportation of the sperm and the ovum and the fertilized ovum back into the uterus. All these are functions of the fallopian tube. Now coming to the main organ where the actually the development of the fetus will take place. Even though this is secondary organ, the primary organ in case of female is the ovary. Okay, but the secondary organ is the uterus, but it has plays a very important role because here the fetus will stay for and develops for almost 9 months. So uterus also plays a very important role. It is a hollow, pear-shaped muscular organ. As you can see here, it's a thick wall. So it is a highly muscular organ. It is in the young nulliparous adult, it measures 3 into 2 into 1 inches. In case of nulliparous, nulliparous means those females who have never given birth to any children. So in case of those females, it will be very small, just 3 inches in the length, 2 inches in breadth, and 1 inch in thickness. Okay, but during if there is a fertilization and the fetus starts developing, then it becomes a very huge organ and becomes pelvic, from pelvis to becomes an abdominal organ. Okay, so it has the capacity to expand to a very large extent, and this is the lumen of the uterus. Divided into 3 parts. The upper part above the opening of the fallopian tube, this is called as the fundus, and here is the body, and the lowermost part is called as the cervix. The fundus is the part of the uterus that lies above the entrance of the uterine tubes. So, as I said, above the opening of the fallopian tubes, uterine tubes, this part is called as the fundus of the uterus. Then we have the body, the part of the uterus that lies below the entrance of the uterine tubes. Cavity is triangular. If you see, this is the cavity, uterine cavity, it is triangular and lies below the opening of the fallopian tubes. This is called as the body. Then we have the cervix, the lowermost part. It is the narrow part of the uterus. It pierces the anterior wall of the vagina and divided into many parts. So this is the narrow part of the uterus, a very slightly distensible part, and it pierces the wall of the vagina. So this is the vagina here. Okay, so it pierces the wall of vagina and divided into 3 parts. One part is above the vagina is called a supravaginal, and the part below it, this is called as the vaginal part, and its cavity is called as it is fusiform. 2 ends are narrow and the middle part is broad. This is called as fusiform. So there are 2 parts of this, supravaginal and vaginal, and the cavity is fusiform, and in body the cavity is triangular. Now coming to the cervical canal, the cavity of the cervix, which we saw here, it is fusiform. Okay, this is the cervical canal. Okay, the cervical canal communicates with the cavity of the body through the internal os and with that of the vagina to the external os. If you see here, the narrow part, okay, these are called as this part which is communicating with the uterus, that is called as the internal os, and that part of the cavity which is opening into the vagina is called as the external os. This is the internal os and this is the external os, and in between is the cervix and the cervical canal. Okay, so it has 2 openings, external os and the internal os. Before the birth of the first child, the external os is circular. You see here, this opening here outside. If you see from vagina, this is how it looks like. It is circular almost. Okay. So this is the picture shown from inside. If you see from here, this will be in the case of the before the first child is birth. So this internal the external os will be round circular. In a paraswoman, after the there is delivery, and this man is called as the paraswoman. The vaginal part of the cervix is larger and external becomes transverse slit, as you can see here. Instead of rounded being rounded, now it becomes transverse slit. Okay, after multiple pregnancies and deliveries. So that it possesses an anterior lip and a posterior lip. So now it will have an anterior lip. This is called an anterior lip, and this is called as the posterior lip. This is how it looks like when you see through the vagina. Now coming to the some of the important relations of the uterus. So what are the relations? Okay, for the fundus and body, the supravaginal part of the cervix will be present here. So fundus, here is the fundus and the body and the supravaginal part of the cervix. So the anterior, we have the superior surface of the bladder. If you see here in the front of this, the uterus and the vagina. So the anteriorly we have the superior surface of the bladder, superior surface of the bladder. Posteriorly, we have the sigmoid colon. Posteriorly for the vagina, especially there is the sigmoid colon as well as the rectum. Okay. Then laterally, we have the uterine arteries. You will not see in this picture. On either side, there will be the uterine artery. The vaginal part of the cervix is surrounded by the vaginal phloemessus. So this is the vaginal part of the cervix. This is the cervix here. Vaginal part has four spaces. These are called anterior phloemix and posterior phloemix and lateral phloemix. Let me show you here. So this is not clear. Here is the anterior phloemix, posterior phloemix here, and on either side there will be lateral phloemix. So that is the space when you see surrounding the vagina. The anterior wall phloemix of the vagina. In front of that, anteriorly we have the anterior phloemix of the vagina. Posteriorly we have the posterior phloemix of the vagina. Laterally we have the lateral phloemixes. Okay, so these are some of the relations. Now coming to the position of the uterus. What is the normal position of the uterus? This is called as, the usual position is called as anteverted anteflex. Anteverted and anteflex. This angulation, this shape, this angulation is called as anteverted anteflex. So anteversion. So this is 90 degree, and this is the between the long axis of the cervix and the long axis of the vagina. This 90 degree, and this is called as angle of anteversion. Anteflexion, it is the long axis of the uterus and the long axis of the cervix. This angulation is obtuse and is called as anteflexion. So it is anteverted, anteflex, or anteflexed and anteverted position of the uterus. This is the normal position. Okay. So if there is any changes, this is how it looks like. Okay. So anteverted uterus, long axis of the whole uterus is bent forwards on the long axis of the vagina. So the whole axis of this is the anteversion. So the long axis of the uterus, or to be more specific, it is the cervix and the vagina. Okay. Anteflexion, it is the long axis of the uterus bent along the long axis of the cervix. This is the long axis cervix. This angulation is called an anteflexion. So the normal position is anteverted anteflex. If there is any change, then it leads to infertility and lot of complications. Okay, so the position of the uterus, it can be retroverted if it is reverse position. If it is in the opposite direction, that is called a retroverted uterus. Fundus and body of the uterus are bent backwards on the vagina and lie in the rectouterine pouch. So it will be bent backward, and there is a pouch called a rectouterine pouch. It will be present within this. Okay. Anteflex or the retroflexed. This is retroverted. Retroflex is long axis of the body of the uterus is bent backwards on long axis of the cervix. Like this, it is called a retroflex, and this is retroverted. So these are abnormal positions, and this leads to infertility, pain, continuous pain, irregularity of the menstrual cycles, and many complications. So that's why the normal position is very important. Coming to the blood supply of the uterus, uterus is supplied by a very tortuous artery called as the uterine artery. There are two uterine artery on either side. This is the uterine artery. On one side is the uterine artery, which is very tortuous. If you can see here, it is very tortuous. Here also it will be there, so it will be very tortuous. This is because when the uterus starts to expand, the artery should not be pulled, but there should be continuous supply. If it is straight, then it can rupture. So it is very tortuous, so that when the uterus expand, it has the capacity to expand also. Okay, so this is the uterine artery. The main supply for the uterus will be uterine artery, arises from the anterior division of the internal iliac artery. In the base of the broad ligament crosses over the ureter, half an inch lateral to the supravaginal cervix. There are two branches, an ascending branch and a descending branch. This artery gives rise to an ascending branch and a descending branch. So the ascending branch will anastomosis with the ovarian artery, which is supplying the ovaries. Coming to the venous drainage, starts as a plexus between the two layers of the broad ligament called as tympaniform plexus. Just like in case of male, we have around the testis tympaniform plexus. Here also there is a plexus of veins. This is called a tympaniform plexus that communicate with the vesical plexus and drain into the uterine as well as the ovarian vein. So here you can see here all these plexus of veins finally drain into the uterine vein. This is the uterine vein, this is the uterine artery. Okay. Now coming to the nerve supply of the uterus, the cervix and body are relatively insensitive to touch, cutting, and burning because they are supplied by the sympathetic and parasympathetic, that is the autonomic nervous system. The cervix is sensitive to dilatation and body is sensitive to distension. So there is difference between the cervix and the body. So the cervix is sensitive to dilatation. This is important because before the delivery, the cervix starts dilating, and because of which there will be delivery. And the body is sensitive to distension. Okay. So the innervation, so the nerve supply of this is by the parasympathetic and sympathetic, that is the autonomic nervous system. Parasympathetic is from S2, S3, and S4, and sympathetic is from T5 and T6 for motor, and T10, T11, T12, and L1 for sensory. Both reach the uterus through the plexus called as the inferior hypogastric plexus. So the main supply of the uterus is by the inferior hypogastric plexus, which consists of the parasympathetic and sympathetic components. Coming to the ligaments, there are uterine as well as the cervical ligaments, okay, which will give the stability to the uterus as well as the cervix. One is the broad ligament, as we have seen the peritoneal fold, that is called as the broad ligament, which is present here. So this is the broad ligament. So here you can see this is the mesoovarian, mesosalpinge, and this is the mesometrium. Okay. Now this all together is called the broad ligament. Then we have the round ligament. Round ligament, if you can see here, there is the round ligament of the uterus, which will keep the uterus in its position. Then we have the ovarian ligament, the ligament of the ovary. So here you can see here, this is the ovarian ligament, so the ligament of the ovary. Okay, so these are the three important ligaments. To begin with, the broad ligament, as I said, it is a double sheet peritoneal fold. This is the broad ligament, which is nothing but a double sheet peritoneal fold that extends from the lateral wall of the uterus to the lateral pelvic wall. So it extends from all the way from the lateral wall of the uterus up to the lateral pelvic wall. Its outer part forms the infundibulopelvic ligament, in which the ovarian vessels traverse through the way to the ovary. As you can see, we have already seen the ovarian artery as well as the uterine artery passes through the broad ligament. Here you can see the broad ligament covering the uterus as well as present on the deep inside that we can see the ovarian artery and the vein. Contents of the broad ligament, one is the round ligament, as we saw before. This is the round ligament here that will be present inside these two folds. Then we have the ovarian ligament or the ligament of ovary. Then we have seen the uterine vessels, uterine artery and vein. Then the ureters partly, as well as the parametro, the lymphatics, as well as the lymph nodes, sympathetic and parasympathetic. All the nerves, veins, arteries, everything will be present lymphatics will be present. Okay. Then we have the second structure called as the round ligament. Round ligament. This is the round ligament here on either side. So which will be keeping the uterus in its position. It is a fibromuscular ligament attached to the uterine column. Uterine column it is attached, runs downwards and forwards in between the two layers of the broad ligament to enter the inguinal canal. It passes through the inguinal canal. In case of the male, the spermatic cord will be there in the inguinal canal, but in case of female, it will be the round ligament. This is the ligament which it is present in case of the female in the round the inguinal canal. So this round ligament will enters through the inguinal canal, the internal inguinal ring, and comes out to the extra inguinal ring to be inserted in the upper part of the labium majus. So from a labium majus up to the uterus, this is connected to the round ligament. It pulls the uterus forwards and help keeping it in anteverted position. So this ligament will be pulling forwards and it will keep the uterus bent forwards. Okay, that is the anteverted position. Then we have the ovarian ligament. As we saw, this is here will be the ovarian ligament, very short ligament. Here you can see this is the ovarian ligament. It is also called as ligament of ovary. It is a fibromuscular ligament that attach the inner lower pole of the ovary to the column of the uterus, and it plays no role in pelvic support of the uterus. It plays no role in in pelvic support. It is mainly the round ligament which will help in keeping the position in its position. Okay. Now coming to some of the cervical ligaments, there are three important ligaments. Okay, I will show you. These are the three cervical ligaments. One is called as the McEnroe's ligament, the cardinal ligament of the cervix, spread out on either side from the lateral surface of the cervix and vagina, fan-shaped manner, and we inserted the lateral wall. So if you can see here, this is the cardinal ligament on either side. Then you have the sacrocervical ligament, or it is also called as uterosacral ligament. Okay. Then we have in the front we have the pubocervical ligament. Pubocervical ligament, uterosacral ligament, or it is also called as the sacrocervical ligament. Okay, if it is attached to cervix or the uterus, depending on that, it is called as the uterosacral or cervicosacral or sacrocervical. Okay. Then the cardinal ligament on either side will be the McEnroe's. These are the three important ligaments which are the chief supports of the uterus. Chief supports of the uterus. Okay. Coming to the pelvic floor, so around the pelvis there is a pelvic floor. Okay. All the tissues lying between the pelvic cavity and the surface of the vulva and vagina. Vagina and the vulva here. So in between them there is a pelvic floor. It includes the pelvic peritoneum, okay, peritoneal fold, the extra peritoneal fat and cellular tissue which will present again here, the levator ani muscle. There is a very important muscle. This is the important pelvic floor. Levator ani muscle and the fascia coating. Then the triangular ligament called as urogenital diaphragm. This is the urogenital diaphragm. Then we have the perineal muscles and their aponeurosis, subcutaneous fascia, fat, skin, everything. Skin will be here, fat will be here. All this together will form the pelvic floor. One of the very important part of the pelvic floor is the pelvic diaphragm. This is the pelvic diaphragm. It is formed of the levator ani muscle, as you saw here. This is the levator ani muscle on either side. It forms the pelvic diaphragm. It is formed of the levator ani muscle and the fascia which covers the upper and lower surface. It is also covered by a fascia on the top as well as below. So this is the levator ani muscle. Levator ani muscle has parts. One part which is attached to the ischium, it is called the ischiococcygous part. This part. Then we have the iliococcygeus. So there will be muscle coming from the coccyx to the ilium. Then we have the pubococcygeus going up to the pubic bone from the coccyx. So there are fibers running from here to here. These are called a pubococcygeus, iliococcygeus, and the ischiococcygous. This is the ischium, ischiococcygous. All this together form the levator ani. It is traversed by urethra, so it is completely covering the this pelvic pelvis, except there are some openings. One is for the urethra here in the front and the vagina. Okay, so the urethra and vagina will be here and the rectum will be here. So these are the only two openings to be present. All other parts are covered by the levator ani. Okay, which form the main strong pelvic diaphragm. It provides support to the pelvic organ. This muscle is very important for the pelvic organ support. So if it is damaged, then it leads to a condition called as the prolapse of uterus, vagina, everything. Okay. Now coming to the next organ, that is the vagina, the lowermost part here. This is called as the vagina. It is a fibromuscular tube. So it is a fibromuscular tube extending from the external os. This is the external os from external os along the pelvis and the perineum to open into the ula. So this is the ula or vulva. Okay, female external genitalia behind the urethral opening. This is the urethra. This is the bladder and this is the urethra, and just behind that is the external vaginal opening. Okay. The length of this vagina anterior wall is shorter compared to the posterior wall. The anterior wall is just 7.5 centimeter, but the posterior wall is 9 centimeter. Anterior wall is 7.5 centimeters, but the posterior wall is 9 centimeters. The function of this vagina is for copulation, and it is also for the birth canal. It acts as a birth canal as well as copulatory. So this is how it looks like vagina. The cervix here through the vagina, and here you can see this is the anterior fornix space between the vagina and the cervix. This is called anterior fornix. This is the posterior fornix, and these are the two lateral fornixes. So fornix are nothing but the space between the cervix and the vagina. Coming to some of the important relations of the vagina anteriorly, as we have seen, this is the vagina. Anteriorly, we have seen the upper part, we see the urinary bladder. In the lower part, we see the urethra. Lower part urethra. Posteriorly, in the upper part, we see the rectum, and in the lower part, it is the anal canal. And on the lateral side, it will be the ureterus. On either side, there will be ureter, not shown in this picture. Coming to the blood supply of the vagina, it will be by the vaginal artery, which is a branch from the internal iliac artery. Then the venous drainage is through the vaginal plexus to the internal iliac vein, and lymphatic drainage again to the internal iliac group of lymph nodes. So it is all related to the because it is a pelvic organ, so everything is supplied by the internal iliac artery, vein, and the lymph nodes. Coming to the ula, the vulva, which is seen from external. This is the external genitalia of the female. The outside we have the mons veneris. This is the mons veneris, okay, which is also called the mons pubis in the front. It is a pad of fat overlying the symphysis pubis and covered by the skin and the hair. So it is just in front of the pubic symphysis, filled with fat, and it is covered by skin and hair, hairy area. Then behind that is the clitoris. Clitoris. Okay, it is an erectile tissue cavernous structure below the pubic symphysis. So it is erectile tissue just behind the mons pubis. Okay, below the pubic symphysis, it is formed of small glands and two corpora cavernous, just like it is the female counterpart of the penis. In case of male, penis has developed well, but in case of female, it will become very short. It becomes clitoris, and it will have the erectile tissue that is called as the corpora cavernosa, just like in case of the penis. Then we have the labia majora. Labia majora is on either side, so it is also called as the labia majus. It is the outer two skin folds raised by the underlying fat. Thick pad of fat will be inside this. Okay, and passing back from the mons veneris to the perineum, from the mons veneris to the perineum. The outer skin is covered by hair, so a lot of hair will be there, while the inner medial surface is smooth, hairless, and contains sebaceous and sweat glands. So inner side will have no hair, hairless, as well as there will be sebaceous and sweat glands. Now coming to the labium minus. This is the labium minus or minora. Okay. So this is two thin skin folds of modified skin situated medial to the labia majora, and it will be devoid of fat, no fat, only thin skins. labia major, skin with deep pad of fat inside that. Now coming to the further some of the structures. One is the hymen. Hymen is a thin membrane around the opening of the vagina. So this is called as the hymen. It is a membrane situated about 2 centimeters from the vestibule, that is the opening that demarcates the external from the internal organs and partially closes the vaginal orifice. This is the vaginal opening or orifice. It is closed by the hymen in case of the virgin females, but it ruptures after the first intercourse. Then the Bartholin glands. There are small glands here called as the Bartholin glands or greater vestibular glands. Bilateral components of the isthmus glands secrete mucus during sexual excitement. Situated deep in the labia majora, the junction of the posterior and middle thirds, and two ducts, 2 centimeter long, open between the hymen and the labium major. Okay, so if you see here, they are shown here. These are the Bartholin glands, are also called as the greater vestibular glands. These are racemose glands and they will be secreting mucus during sexual excitement. Then we have the vestibule, that is the opening, the area between the inner aspect of the labia minora and the forceps. The structure that open in the vestibule are the urethra. So you can see the within the vestibule we have the urethra. Then we have Bartholin glands we have seen. Then the vagina. So urethra, vagina, and the Bartholin glands which you have seen here. Then we have the vestibular bulbs, oblong masses of erectile tissue that lie on either side of the vaginal introitus opening. There will be vestibular bulbs. The external urethral meatus, this urethral opening is called external urethral meatus. It is a triangular slit in the anterior part of the vestibule, below the clitoris, just below that, in which the urethra opens. Then we have one more type of gland. These are called as skin ducts and glands. Two blindly ending paraurethral tubules which open into the floor of the urethra, few millimeters from the external urethral meatus. If you see here, these are the skinny glands, Nidus gland, and their orifice openings. Now going to the secondary accessory organ, that is the female breast. Okay, so it is a conical in shape. So as you can see here, it is cone-like with a tail of spans. Okay, it has a base, apex, and tail, axial tail of spans. Okay, so it has a base behind, then we have the apex. This is the apex, and here this is the tail. This is called as the axial tail of spans. Its base extends from the second to the sixth rib. From the second to the sixth rib, it will be totally attached. That is called as a base. It has no capsule, and it is present in the superficial fascia, and it has no capsule. Location, lies in the superficial fascia of the front of the chest. It extends from the lateral margin of the sternum to the mid-axial line. From the sternum up to the mid-axial line. So this will be the extension of the female breast. 2/3 of this base lies on the pectoralis major, while its inferior lateral 1/3 on the serratus anterior and the external oblique. If you see here, this is the muscle here. This is the pectoralis major, on which 2/3 of this muscle will be strained, and the lower 1/3 will be on the serratus anterior muscle as well as the external oblique muscle. Okay, so here is the mammary gland or the breast. So 2/3 will be lying on this muscle called the pectoralis major, and below we have the serratus anterior as well as the external oblique. Its superior lateral part sends a process into the axilla called as axial tail or the axillary process. So here is the axial tail, the axillary process. Okay, which is also called as the axial tail of the spans. Okay, then going to the nipple and the areola. So here we see this is the nipple and the areola. Before we go further, let me take your attendance. I will forget. Okay, let me take your attendance first. So here you can see then the nipple and the areola. Nipple, it is a conical element that projects forwards from the anterior surface of the breast. This nipple usually lies in the fourth intercostal space, and it carries 15 to 20 narrow pores of the lactiferous duct. It will have many pores, multiple pores called as the openings. These are called as these are the lactiferous duct openings. Okay, if you see here, these are the lactiferous ducts opening separately. Okay, so all these are the lactiferous ducts around 14 or to 14, which will be opening here, or sometimes more 15 to 20 also. Coming to the areola, which is around, this is the dark pigmented area, dark brownish circular area of the skin that surrounds the nipple. The subcutaneous tissue of the nipple and the areola is devoid of fat and hair. There are no fat in this nipple and areola, as well as there are no hair. Coming to the further details, so as I said before, it is non-capsulated, so there is no capsule and it lies in the superficial fascia. It has fibrous strands which run radially and connect the skin with the deep fascia of the pectoralis major. So from here there will be fibrous bands which will be connecting the if you see here, there will be fibrous bands here not shown in the pictures. So there will be fibrous bands which are running from the skin to the deep fascia. So this is important. Later we'll discuss why. Okay. So these are called as fibrous strands. It consists of lobes and lobules which are embedded in the subcutaneous fatty tissue of the superficial fascia. If you see here, these are called lobes and lobules. So multiple lobules all joined together to open into a single lactiferous duct, and this one duct will be opening all the lobules, and this is called as one lobe. One lobe will be drained by one lactiferous duct. Okay. So it is separated from the deep fascia covering the underlying muscles by a layer of loose agar tissue, which forms the retromemory fascia. So this is the retromemory space filled with subcutaneous tissue over which this whole gland is moving. So it is freely mobile because of the retromemory space here. So there is subcutaneous tissue deep inside. Okay. It is formed of 15 to 20 lobes, as we said before. So there are 3 lobes, and each lobe will be drained by one lactiferous duct. Okay. Each lobe is formed of a number of lobules, and the lobes and lobules are separated by the interlobular and interlobular fibrous tissue called as the ligament of Cooper. So there will be ligament fibrous bands called as ligament of Cooper. So these are very important because during cancer of the breast, carcinoma of the breast, infiltration of these ligaments will lead to a condition called an orange appearance, that is called as fluidy orange. So if you see here the skin, so it looks like as though it has the skin of an orange. Okay, this is because of the infiltration of the carcinoma over the ligament of the Cooper, which will pull the gland upwards, and it will make the skin look like that of a skin of an orange. So that's why it is called as purely orange appearance. It has 15 to 20 lactiferous ducts because there are 15 to 20 lobes. Okay, and they all open separately into the nipple. The lactiferous ducts are radially arranged from the nipple, so the incision of the gland should be made in a radial direction. If you see here, so all these are present in radial fashion. So when you do surgery, so you should be able to do it radially so that you don't cut along the lobes and lobules. Coming to the blood supply, because it is the main organ for production of milk, so it is highly vascular, supplied by lot of arteries. One is the perforating branches of the internal iliac artery or the internal memory artery. This is the internal memory artery. It is also called an internal thoracic artery. So it will give multiple branches. These are called as the perforating branches. And the memory branches of the lateral thoracic artery. If you see here, this is the lateral thoracic artery, which is the multiple branches here. Then the memory branches of the intercostal artery. Then the intercostal artery, which are here, they also give branches. So all these will supply the breast. Venous drainage is by the veins are corresponding to the arteries. The names are very similar to the arteries. The circular venous plexus are formed around the base of the nipple, and they form a plexus around the base of the nipple and the areola. Finally, the veins drain, this plexus drain into the axillary and the internal thoracic vein, into the axillary vein, as well as just beside the axillary with the axillary vein, as well as the internal thoracic vein, which is beside the intrathoracic artery. Okay. Coming to the lymphatic drainage is very important because during carcinoma of the breast, this lymphatic drainage counts a lot. Okay, so that's why you should know the lymphatic drainage. The central and lateral part of the breast is layered, almost 75% drain into the pectoral group of axillary lymph nodes. So almost 75% drain into the axillary group of lymph nodes. The upper part of the gland drains into the apical group of lymph nodes. You see here, this is the upper part, it drains directly into the apical group. The medial part drains into the internal thoracic. So this is the internal thoracic lymph nodes. From there, it crosses to the opposite side and it can infiltrate the other breast also. Some lymphatics from the medial part of the gland pass across the front of the sternum to anastomosis with the opposite side. As I said, so these glands, these lymph nodes can cross to the opposite side, lymphatics, and they can infiltrate the opposite. The lymphatics from the inferior medial part anastomosis with the lymphatics of the rectus sheath. So the inferior part, they can go to the rectus sheath and linea alba and subvasal pass deep to the anastomosis with the subdiaphragmatic lymphatics. So they can cross to the abdomen and they can infiltrate of the abdomen. So you can see how dangerous it can be if there is carcinoma. It can infiltrate the opposite side, it can go to the abdomen, it can go to the apical part, as well as it can even go to the backbone. Okay. So what are the axillary group of lymph nodes? There are multiple group of lymph nodes here. The axillary nodes are arranged into the pectoral group, that is the anterior group. Here you can see here, this is called as anterior pectoral group. Then we have the subscapular or the posterior group. So here you can see the subscapular or the posterior group. Then we have the brachial lateral group, which will present here near the humerus, more laterally here, not here, it will be more present here. Then we have the central group and the apical group. All these are the group of lymph nodes which are present in the axillary group of lymph nodes. Okay. The subareolar plexus, which will be around this nipple and the areola, lies beneath the areola, and there is deep lymphatic plexus lies on the deep fascia of the covering of the pectoris major. So they will be draining into the subareolar plexus as well as deep lymphatics. Both plexus radiate into many directions and drain into different group of lymph nodes. As we saw, it can go to the axillary group, it can go to the internal group, and from there to the opposite breast, and it can go to the drain into the abdomen also. So this is all about this lecture, which included the female reproductive system as well as the breast. So if you have any doubts, you can ask me now.
No, thank you. Everything is clear.
So if you don't have any doubts, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.